Hi, welcome to the Library Podcast. My name is Kim. In this episode, we are discussing some fantastic felines in literature. Cats have intrigued and inspired the human imagination for thousands of years. Scientists are still not sure when cats became the pet animals we think of now. Archaeologists discovered a grave dating back over 9,500 years that contained the skeletal remains of a cat laid to rest close to the remains of a human. There is still no academic consensus on what this discovery signifies, and recent researchers suggest that cats became more pet-like 3.5 to 4,000 years ago. It seems rather fitting that the origins of the pet cat is still rather puzzling. Due to the long history of the human and cat relationship, it is no surprise that cats and cat-like creatures feature in folklore from around the world. For example, there is the giant Icelandic Yule cat, which stalks Iceland's countryside in search of naughty children during the holiday season. Japan's rich literary history is filled with memorable cats. Perhaps for some listeners, they immediately thought of the novels of Haruki Murakami, which often feature cats, when they read what the topic of this podcast episode was about. For example, Murakami's novel Kafka on the Shore tells the story of a character who can communicate with cats. Recently, there has been a significant growth in novels published in Japan that feature the word cat in the title, and lucky for us, many have been translated into English. Cats in fiction are often differentiated from our canine companions as being more individualistic, fickle, and perhaps even aloof. Cats can be tricksters, but they can also be helpers. One of the most iconic literary cats, the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland, is both a trickster and helper. While he seems to be almost teasing Alice with his riddles, it is the riddles that help push Alice to recognize the madness around her, and this helps her to find her way through Wonderland. Unlike Alice, we know what path we would like to take, and that's the one with more cats. So since we're going to be spending time talking about felines, I thought I would start by asking Fred and Anne-Marie if they have cats now or have ever had a pet cat.
I come from a long line of dogs, dog lovers, except for my sister. She swings both ways. She has cats right now, but she claims to still love dogs.
I myself, I've never had a pet cat, but my husband, when I first met him, he had two cats, Misha and Kyler. And Misha did not care for me, but Kyler enjoyed my company.
I myself have one cat, and her name is Teffy, and she's named after a Russian author whose work I really like. And I also think the name suits a cat because you can just go Teffy, 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 and she wags her little tail. So I was wondering, what were some of the first books that came to your mind when you heard that we would be talking about cats in literature?
Dr. Seuss, The Cat in the Hat. I am embarrassed to admit that was the first thing that came to mind. And then the various cats that paraded through the Little House on the Prairie books. There were a few.
I think The Cat in the Hat's a great example.
I right away thought of a book called Mog, the Forgetful Cat by Judith Kerr. And so it's a beloved classic children's book that was published in 1970, so a very long time ago. And it's actually based on a cat that the author had as a pet. So a lot of the adventures that happened to the cat happened is based on what happened to her cat. And then I used to read this book all the time. It was one of my favorite books. And so I thought I would read it again to figure out why did I love this book so much. And I realized that as a child, I was Mog.
Mm.
I was a very sensitive child who tried her very best to please those around me, and often by doing so, messed things up and irritated people.
Oh.
So, but the best part about this book is at the end that Mog saves the day and is the hero of the story just by being quirky Mog. So I think as a child, it gave me hope
Mhm.
that one day being a quirky kid would pay off and I would one day be a hero and save the day.
Oh, I love that. I've never read Mog, but I've seen the cover.
It's a
And
very cool
oh,
cover.
do you know, did the author illustrate it as well?
Oh, I'm not sure. That's a really good question. I'm not sure, but it's very well illustrated, and the cover is just like a giant cat, takes up the whole entire book. Yeah, it's adorable. Yeah.
That's amazing. So now we're going to go on to sharing some book recommendations for people who may want to have some feline books to read. Fred, we'll start with you.
Okay, well, as I said, my sister is a cat person, and a few years back, I gave her a book I'd heard about on CBC called The Lion in the Living Room: How House Cats Tamed Us and Took Over the World. The author is Abigail Tucker. So I did a little research on her. I got my sister to lend me the book again. Haven't quite finished it. But she's a scientific journalist, and she's done a lot of writing for the Smithsonian Magazine. And some of her writing sounds very interesting and not particularly about cats. Sniffing out the science of smelling. From the lab to the art gallery, the latest efforts to understand the fragrant, musky, stinky, and utterly baffling world of your nose. And one called 19th Century Textile Stitches, A Tale of Women's Liberation. So that sounds interesting too. But some cat things, fishing cats face many human threats. What can be done to save them? These are about the wild felines in Asia. But her book starts in the La Brea tar pits in California, and she's examining the skeletons of saber-toothed, colossal cheetahs, and even giant cave lions that lived there at that time. Many, many years ago. I guess, was it when I didn't even see what age it was, but the La Brea tar pits. Anyway, um, then she goes into some correlation of brain size of wild animals to domesticated animals. And apparently the brains get smaller as animals become domesticated, which I find interesting. I don't really have any reasoning about why that would be. Um, she says it's obvious why humans cultivated canine companionship. They were hunting partners, they were hot water bottles. Um, Sniffer dogs find drugs in graves and can even detect incipient tumors. But what do we get from cats? She did some research and she said that she found cat purring may boost bone density and prevent muscle wasting. And this is a serious problem for astronauts, but no one has advocated for cats in space. And I don't even know if they're up there on the space station. Maybe they should be. Indonesians paraded them around their fields to encourage rain. Japanese musicians used cat skin for the samisen, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, a square-bodied lute, and apparently modern plastics don't compete. Um, the Chinese used cats' dilating pupils to tell time. This is according to a French missionary who hesitated passing on that knowledge so as not to injure the interests of clockmakers. Cats were also used in many forms of torture. Murderers burned in a sack with 12 cats to maximize suffering, although I don't know why the cats should have to suffer along with the murder. And something called cat hauling. A cat was dragged by its tail down the length of the offender's body. Yeah, they don't taste very good to our palate. They're not eaten very many places in the world, and their skins are seldom worn. But they're supposed to kill rats and mice. Mice maybe, but rarely rats. They're not natural enemies, and they share a common resource, our trash, which is so bountiful they don't need to compete. Some studies have actually found that urban cat populations are associated with higher numbers of house mice. They've been transported all over the world, and some of that travel has led to the severe decline of native species. And of course, their impact on birds is devastating. Free-roaming domestic cats kill an estimated 1.3 to 4 billion birds in the US and 100 to 350 million birds in Canada each year. making them the leading human-caused threat to birds in both countries. The majority of these deaths are attributed to feral cats, not domestic pets that are kept indoors. That seems to be an argument for keeping your cat indoors, although I know many people prefer to have them live a wilder life. And since I haven't finished the book yet, I don't know what the ultimate conclusions are as to how the cats are taking over our world. But she does have an orange cat named Cheeto, so there must be something. She concludes that their appeal to us comes down to their cuteness. And she mentions that cats can bring out a maternal instinct in some women, hence the ubiquity of cat ladies. And her latest book seems to be exploring that theme. It's called Mom Genes Inside the New Science of Our Ancient Maternal Instinct. So if you enjoy The Lion in the Living Room, you might want to look out Mom Genes.
So what I took from that was, as a menopausal woman, I should get a cat because that will help me with my bone density. And because, that can be a problem.
Yes.
So there, okay. I'll let my husband know. I don't know what our dog will think of that, but we'll see. So speaking of having a cat for I guess you could say medical reasons, the book that I'd like to recommend, it's called "Will Prescribe You a Cat," and it's by Sho Ishida. And she is a best-selling Japanese author. And this novel has been translated into English. Just want to let everyone know that. It's a wonderful person recommended it to me, who always has great recommendations. And she was absolutely right. It was fantastic. It is fantastic. And it's very charming and very funny at times, and it's got a little bit of magic realism in there. And it's basically divided into 5 stories that are so heartwarming, and each one features a person who is struggling emotionally or psychologically, and each time there's a particular cat that is prescribed from them for them, and this cat transforms their lives. And there's also a delightful subplot that runs throughout all of the stories. I think the novel, it just really highlights the simple joys of having a cat and the healing power of interacting with a cat and taking care of the cat. And I think one of the main themes of the novel is that cats remind us of what really matters in life, and they bring out the best in their humans. Yeah, so highly recommend We'll Prescribe You a Cat by Sho Ishida.
When I started to think about books that I enjoyed that feature cats as characters, I realized there was actually a lot of them, like Tigger from Winnie the Pooh and Hobbs from Calvin and Hobbes. But the first cat I thought of was a cat named Behemoth from Mikhail Bulgakov's Master and Margarita. I'm just going to give a little bit about how this novel came to be. So it was written between the years of 1928 to 1940. And the author himself actually passed away after it was written in 1940. And the book, it was written in Soviet Russia and was not allowed to be published because it is a dark comedy satire about living under totalitarian regimes and Stalinist Russia specifically. So the book was not allowed to be published until 1967 when an edited version came out. But an unedited version of the book was hand copied by people who read it, and it was passed from reader to reader. Cool. And then it made its way to Paris, where it finally got published as the complete version of the novel. It's actually really thanks to his wife, who kept the novel alive so that it would see the light of day, which is really beautiful because the book itself, while it's very almost big in scope of like philosophy and ideas. It's looking at nature of good and evil, and again, totalitarian governments. But also at the very heart of it is this beautiful love story, and it's like it's hard to classify as a book because it really mixes genres and challenges genres. It's an amazing piece of fiction. And just a little bit of what happens is the devil himself visits atheistic Moscow, and with him he brings an entourage. And in this entourage is Behemoth, a giant black cat who is a trickster, and he's funny. He's not in the book very much, but whenever he is, it's like a highlight of the book. And he's almost always featured on the cover of the novel. Even though he's not a main character, he's a memorable character. So he sort of just came into my mind. And he's introduced the first time you meet him, he's walking on his two back legs because he likes to walk on two legs, not four. And he goes onto a tram and he takes out coins and pays to go on the tram. And you don't know where these coins came from. And everyone's just like, what's going on? But what's interesting is you have these supernatural things taking place in a society where they don't believe that supernatural things can happen. So I really recommend the book. I just think it's a masterpiece, and I believe it's considered one of the greatest novels written in yeah. So it's really inspiring, and there's a quote that's most remembered from it is manuscripts don't burn. And there's a character that's a writer in the book who goes to burn their manuscript, and really that idea of like ideas and art, they don't die. And to tie that to his story of like this book got out. So
That's fantastic.
that's the first cat I thought of. And then I was thinking also of T.S. Eliot's collection of poems, Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats. And yes, it is the book that inspired the musical Cats. Yeah. But if you dislike Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical, don't hold that against the actual poems. They're wonderful, and I think they just kind of bring a smile to your face. And the edition I have is it features drawings that Edward Gorey did. So if you can seek out that one, I would definitely recommend it, because who doesn't want to like see cute cats while you're reading about them? And then lastly, another book that's illustrated is Antonia White's novel Minka and Curdy, the enchanting story of a writer and her cats. And it's just a simple novel about a woman whose elderly cat has passed away, and she's really feeling that loss. But she remembers that she always had this urge to have a Siamese cat, and she goes about to get one. But then there's also this ginger cat that shows up in her life, and it's all about how the three of them learn to live together. Aww. And I'll just give a really short reading to give you an idea of the voice that she uses. So this is the very opening of the book. Mrs. Bell felt very sad when her old cat Victoria died. It was true that Victoria had always been rather a severe cat and by no means easy to please. Even when she was pleased, she did not often purr. Victoria did not believe in spoiling human beings. She had strict ideas about keeping them in their proper places. Still, she had been fond of Mrs. Bell in her own way, and provided Mrs. Bell behaved herself and did exactly what Victoria wanted the moment she wanted it, they had got along very comfortably. Now that Victoria was not there any more, Mrs. Bell found she missed her sulky black and white face and the disapproving meow that said, "You haven't cut up my fish small enough. Come and do it properly, at once." Or, "How many more times do I have to tell you I don't like my milk straight out of the fridge? Come and warm it up this moment." Mrs. Bell's flat now seemed very large and empty.
That was good.
Yeah, it's a very quick read and a nice cozy one. I recommend it for the winter time.
Perfect.
Thanks so much to Anne Marie and Fred for sharing their book recommendations. Marmora Lake is lucky enough to have its own feline mystery series written by local author C. Stewart. The series begins with Crow River Justice and continues in the second novel, Crow River Mercy. Stewart was kind enough to share an excerpt from her first book with the To the Library podcast.
A retired criminal lawyer, William Hawkins, lives with his daughter Jules after the death of his beloved wife Claire. He hates the country. He's miserable. He hates cats, and one in particular, the feral Carl. I hated Carl most of all. Maybe someone had dumped the howling socks on the side of the road, but Carl had been born mean, wild, and ugly. Carl was as silent as the dead, never a chirp, whistle, or meow out of that one. He held your gaze with the most intense stare, beady eyes on everything, everywhere. He would stare, judging me, and huffing cat snot all over the window. His face was smashed in, and half the fur was gone from one cheek. That cat had seen one too many fights. Did he fight bears? What a mess. Carl's square head sat on top of a bulky build. His shoulder muscles were Herculean, made for tree climbing. Yet he was relatively skinny in his behind. This would have been for traction during his climb to freedom to avoid foxes, coyotes, or to hunt. Carl always tilted his head slightly, like he was trying to figure out why I left out food. What was I up to? Jules said true feral cats would never fully trust humans. Smart cat. Carl would sniff at the kibble at each meal with disdain and glare at me, denouncing my cruelty at offering such garbage. Yes, my sin was that I carried dried out, odorless, drab food instead of the malodorous canned mush. My larger sin was that I enjoyed making them wait for the food, proving I wouldn't jump to their tune. Claire had jumped, and what did it get her? Scat on her grave. When I cleaned his feral snot off the dining room glass door, spraying it down with a hose, became more satisfying when Carl was standing right there, waiting for food. Ha ha, oops. Yep, missed the feral snot and watered the furry flower. Here's your dinner, Carl. Don't let the crows steal any, I added as an afterthought. But as I shook dribbles of kibble into the bowl, Carl walked cautiously right up to my feet. He never got that close. I stepped back quickly, afraid to pick up his parasites. Then he spun around and ran a few yards up our long gravel drive. He turned back, flashed his eyeballs at me. He stopped, advanced cautiously and deliberately towards me, and started it all again. Did he want to be chased? He approached too close when he walked back. I could almost feel the itch of his fleas. Was that a tick on my pant leg? Then he repeated the crazy performance 3 more times. Something was up. Okay, all right, I shouted. I obliged him, trailing that cat as if I were on a leash. I followed him down the drive for a bit. Carl got excited. When I stopped to catch my breath, yeah, I was out of shape. He hopped up and down and repeated his follow me routine. I stepped up my pace for a game of chase, and he ran forward faster. I stopped and he stopped and started back towards me. With a human in tow, Carl strolled across the road, swaying and flicking his tail as he crossed into Sandy's yard. I followed through the walkway that ran between Sandy's small blue painted house and her smaller matching blue garage or she shed. Just as Carl stopped dead in his paws, tilted his nose, and then shot off to the back forest and disappeared past the stand of cedars and pines at the back of the lot. I picked up the odd stench that wafted through the air, a faint chemical reminiscent of ammonia from a morgue on a bad day. My head turned towards the stench that seemed to come from the she shed. The screen door squeaked as Sandy suddenly appeared at her back door. I pivoted back towards the house. Her eyes focused on someone behind my left shoulder. She smiled broadly at the person, but then suddenly frowned and screamed, "No! Caw, caw, caw!" 13 crows rose from the trees lining the forest edge, but only 1 crow remained to attest to the sorrow of my demise. I was dead before I hit the ground.
Thank you, C. Stewart, for that wonderful reading. You can find Stewart's first 2 books, Crow River Justice and Crow River Mercy, in bookstores or online now. And you can learn more about Stewart and her books on her website, cstewartauthor.ca. Stewart is currently working on the 3rd book in her mystery series. I hope this episode inspired you to cozy up with a cat character soon, and perhaps consider donating a can of food or two to your local animal rescue for the felines in need in your community. The To the Library podcast is produced by the Marmora and Lake Public Library. Thanks so much for spending time with us. Until next time.